Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this week's GTM News Show. So this week I'm going to be talking to Rachel Downey. She was on an event recently and we talked about B2B podcasting. And podcasting seems like everyone has a podcast these days, right? And so I think we talk about is there still opportunity for folks to do a podcast? And what I found, it's been about a year since I've done the GTM News Show. I've learned so many things. I've actually did an episode a while back on B2B podcasting, and I kind of unpack my process. I unpack also the tools I use, how I got the benefits, the outcomes I've achieved from it. And so I think outside of building an audience and outside of creating content, there's all these incidental benefits you get from B2B podcasting and this long form discussion. And so Rachel shares some tips and some tricks and some ideas, how she frames B2B podcasting and things, ways to look at it, and also ways to get started and execute. So let's jump into my conversation with Rachel. Hey, Rachel, how are we doing?
Hey, Taylor. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for coming on. So Rachel, we're going to talk about B2B podcasting. So first of all, it seems like everyone over the past couple of years has started a B2B podcast. So I wanted to hear from you. Tell me about where is the opportunity, maybe a couple takeaways as you're seeing in the market for B2B podcasting.
Well, so one of the first things I always like to do here is I like to myth bust a little bit. And everyone always says, I shouldn't start a podcast because everyone else is doing it. And the truth is they're not. They're just not. There's at this point in the game, there's probably about little less than 10 million podcasts out there, but there are over 400 million podcast listeners. And that number is growing. And I am no math magician, but I'm telling you that that's still a massive gap and a huge opportunity for people. So the number one thing I always say is that the opportunity is definitely still there. And the second thing I would say is it's never just a podcast. And so I think one of the mistakes a lot of people do is that they launch a podcast, but it's a super siloed effort. And they haven't actually done a great job activating and internalizing it throughout the entire organization or integrating it within their marketing strategy. And so if you go into it thinking about it as just a podcast, you're not going to reap its many, many, many benefits. So those are some of the top things I would say. The other thing I would say is you want to have a unique point of view. Your podcast is an opportunity to get attention using the thing that's come so naturally to many of us, which is communication, conversation, using our voice, using the things that we do, like our hands, you know what I mean? It allows you to personalize yourself, humanize your brand, but do it in a way that allows you to stand out by making sure that you have a very unique point of view in the marketplace. And then my third tip for you, or fourth, if we're keeping track, is set a strategic outcome. Too often people say, everyone's doing a podcast, so I need to do a podcast. Or we all know that podcasts are beautiful for creating content and then leveraging that content into other forms. But I would say back all of that up and make sure that you have a strategic outcome in mind. And the best way to do that is find out from your CEO what they care about right now. What is the one thing that is top of mind for them this quarter, this year, et cetera? And then attach your podcast effort to helping solve that specific outcome. And I would say just to help, everyone listening out there, what could a strategic outcome look like that a podcast could support? I really distilled it into one of four. So it could be, we want to build brand. We need more people to know that we exist, right? Another one could be drive demand, which so many people want, right? Is drive demand. That's always going to be a strategic outcome. Third one could be, we need to grow our audience. Not enough people know about us. And then a fourth one that a lot of people don't think about is that is a top outcome would be recruiting, retaining talent. So it's how could our show help us accomplish one of those strategic outcomes?
I love it, Rachel. Wow, packed full ideas there. First, I love tying it back into strategic outcomes, and I think that's a good advice for any go-to-market practitioner or leader. There's a lot of hey, let's do TikTok, let's do podcasting, let's do that, and a lot of times we kind of fail to kind of tie back into the business objectives and actually driving change and results for the company. Is there any mistakes you see? Maybe a couple things you see, common mistakes folks make when they're obviously, if they solve all the first 3 or 4 ideas you shared, just getting started, common things people do wrong that you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah, I think one of the things I see people will make a mistake on is when they go to launch podcasts, because podcast is a unique thing and that it is a channel, but it is also a content. And so I think a lot of times people go launch the channel and they're like, where's my audience? Why am I not growing? What is happening? And they fail to do the due diligence of saying, where are we already? Where is my audience already at? And have we dominated that channel? And so the reason I say that very specifically is I go, look, if you are not dominating the channel that your audience is already on, let's say it's LinkedIn, and you're not dominating it there, do not make the mistake of neglecting that channel. So use your podcast as a way to create content for LinkedIn. So you can sort of passively stand up this podcast channel, but use it to create content for LinkedIn. And the reason I always do that, and the reason I started the conversation where like this is a channel that allows you to humanize your brand really, really quickly, is because you are using your voice, you are in video, you are using content that way, you're in conversation, which is the primary way people create connection. And so I'm like, use the podcast channel to do that, but make sure you're dominating LinkedIn from a distribution amplification perspective, using the content that you can pull from that channel. So I think that's something that people seem like get lost in the sauce on. And it's really important you anchor back on, where is my audience today? Where are they today? And make sure that you're dominating that channel and just leveraging the podcast content to do that so well. And then the second thing I would say there from an audience perspective is like knowing like who your audience is critical for creating content that has that unique point of view that grabs their attention. So title and industry is not enough. Like you have to uncover what they love, what they hate, what they're missing. You want to create content that helps like win them over. And so making sure you do your due diligence to know what, like how you want them to actually feel when they experience your content helps you make a show that actually can stand out.
I love that. And first two things I took away from that. Number one is, sounds like a lot of obviously repurposing the content, remixing it for wherever your audience lives, and maximizing really all the energy you put into creating that long form content. In addition to that, I heard kind of understanding the almost, if I'm hearing you correctly, almost like the non-professional aspects of your audience, in the sense of like, you know, if your audience is into a specific type of, consumer media or different other products or whatnot, and understanding them from the holistic sense, even the type of humor they enjoy or not humor, right? Maybe humor is not a part of something that your audience enjoys, and integrating that. Because I see some of the best content out there is content that really speaks to the audience, not just from the professional side, but from, just them as an individual and as a human. Super cool. We only got a minute or two left here. I'm curious, getting started and or scaling, any advice you have for like folks that are getting started? What type of investment? I know your organization helps folks, launch and scale podcasts. But I'm just curious, what type of investment? I run my own podcast, so I have my own thoughts on that. But just curious, your thoughts on getting started. And then where are some places where you're like, hey, this is working, and how and can we scale it? Like where should we really invest in it? Where are those signals where we can scale it from there? Kind of a two-part question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I will try and be very, very succinct here. So the one thing I would say is like, make sure that you have a strategic outcome in mind, no matter what. We're going to niche down on that audience. And then the third thing I would say is have a content first mentality when you're shaping the development of the show itself. From an investment perspective or resourcing standpoint, this is the question I would always ask. I would say, do I need help end to end? And what I mean by that is like, do I need somebody who can drive editorial decisions for me? Do I need somebody to shape that? Or do I have somebody internally who can do that? So do I need help end to end? Or do I just need help on post-production? Because post-production is essentially the administrative to-dos off of your plate, including like the editing, the repurposing, and all that kind of stuff. So your investment is going to depend on answering that question. Do I need a producer, or do I just need post-production support? And then your price range can go from there. The other question I would ask myself from an investment perspective is like, am I good being a generalist in the sense that I need to like run all the plays myself and hire a whole bunch of freelancers who can help me? Or do I just want one-to-one where I get everything that I need done with one resource? And that could look like an agency partnership. That could look like hiring a freelancer producer who can do things end to end. But that sort of helps you anchor it, is like, do I need post-production or do I need full support? And sometimes you only need full support up front and helping like shape the idea, et cetera, and then you're off to the races. And so that's how I would frame that. And then from a when is it time to scale perspective, to me, it comes down to that thing I said at the beginning, like, have I dominated the channel that my audience is already spending time with us on? If the answer to that is yes, am I now ready to drive them to another channel, which could be the podcast, for example? And then from there, it's like, where am I taking them next? And so I just think about things like deep focus and deep like consistency there before I start to scale up. But at the end of the day, it is never just a podcast. So you launch that channel and then you use that content for all of its gold on all of the other channels that you're needing to be active on.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for coming on. Really great insights. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.